Hi, I'm Susan Carlson and welcome to my studio. One of the hurdles I find in designing a fabric collage quilt is fabric selection. Because once you have your subject matter, then you have to start with a piece of fabric. And that's sometimes a really hard thing to figure out. What are you going to do when you have all this great fabric around you? So I find that if you have a story, that can help, because the story can help limit your selection. So in this case, this is a quilt entitled Dixie, Dingo, Dreaming, and it's of our dog Pippin, who was a Dixie Dingo. And that's a native dog of the Americas. You can read more about it in my blog post. But the dingo reference gave me an idea of how I could limit my fabric selection, because I loved collecting some Australian Aboriginal print fabrics. And I had a few of them when I came up with this idea of doing a portrait of Pippin, our dog, our Dixie Dingo, in all Aboriginal design fabrics. But now I have quite a few more fabrics than I did then. So as I was thinking about doing this little video piece about my fabric selection and how I use these particular prints, because they are very large patterned prints, and sometimes you look at them and you think, wow, those are really, beautiful designs, but how in the world would you ever use them? I started looking through these fabrics, and this is about 6 years past the time when I actually made this quilt. So I'm looking through all these fabrics, and it was kind of hard finding the ones that had just the little bits that I used, because I cut out little parts of these fabrics and put them all together in the collage of Pippin, and then of course the background too. So these here are the ones that I could narrow down so many years after the fact that I had used for this piece. And like, for instance, this fabric here, you can see it's got a really great design in it, and all sorts of things happening, great color, but I selected it because of the light colors that are in here, the whites. And I then cut a section of this out. You can see I've got a couple missing pieces there, and I was able to put it in a light area right here on her chest, and also right down here on her leg. Now that was one of the light values, because what I was looking for in my fabrics is not just the pattern that was in it, but also the light, the lighter values. So here are a few of the selections that I had for some of these light colors of her. Even this fabric here that has, let's see, what all does it have in it? It's got snakes in it, and it has the gathering baskets. I took a section of it, let's see, where was it? Something like in here. And I just cut out this area, and I was able to put it right down here in her leg. So that's the kind of small little pieces that I was using, but all together, all these different things add up, and it makes a really nice jumble of light values. And these worked really nicely for some of the, those tufts of neck fur that kind of poked out around her collar. And speaking of the collar, I had a fabric that was really good for that. And she had a collar that had geckos on it. And this particular fabric actually has some geckos on it. And I was able to cut it in a band that worked just perfect for her collar. So that was kind of fun to find. The medium values on her fur, these fabrics worked well. Here, when we're talking about her fur and all the kind of fluffiness of her fur, this one worked really well. And that you can see I worked in right here as a darker value of fur that's kind of poking out from underneath those lighter folds of fur. And then of course she had the darker parts of her, and some of these fabrics worked for that. This one especially worked well. It's, if you look at it, what you see are the snakes in it. Those wonderful Australian snakes. But when I cut just these, the dark areas, what's behind, it left me some really nice curves and contours that I was able to then put down in her curves and contours as well. And then up here, I particularly liked using that fabric for this kind of a little divot in her forehead. You might have a dog that has that sort of look to it. And that I just loved. I laid that down, and that made the little dip in her forehead perfectly. And I love looking at that and remembering her. Okay, and once I was finished with her, then I went on to the background. And because she was mostly light, just a little bit of dark around her edges, the Aboriginal fabric does have quite a limited palette of colors. They're very earthy, but they do have a lot of really rich reds. And reds turned out to be a really good value change between, you know, Pippin and then the background. So my son here with the rays was had the warm colors, you know, from something like this. These were used a lot. See, it's all these different different pieces that I cut apart and just recollaged together to make this sun. But a lot of the reds that you see here worked really nicely together to create the background. When I put all of them together, they you know, collaged in strips to create the radiating sun. And that worked really nice. And then things like this just got cut out in just little pieces of, here's the circles that every so often went along these lines that are very, very prevalent in the Aboriginal designs. Then the very bottom here, when I continue as far as contrast goes, it's like, well, what was the floor going to be? What was going to be the background? And so darks were good. And those fabrics are right here. Here's some of the floor fabrics. What I did with this one is that I used, which one is it? Ah, it was right here. There we go. See, this is very typical as far as some of those designs go. And I was able to cut out, obviously I had a bigger piece when I did this before, but you can see right here, this little bit of border, kind of wiggly border fabric, I used right here. I cut it out as a band, and then I laid it down as kind of a guide for filling in around it with all these other fabrics that I had in darker colors. And so this one, I like this one. It added a little bit of spark of color. A little brighter red to some of the darker blacks that were in it. So, oh, and then one more thing that I want to show you that I was particularly happy to use. So if you read the blog post, you'll find out that this is a portrait not only of the dog, our dog Pippin, but in the background I've kind of worked in a story of our family at the time. So there was the people and the fur people and the feathered person that was with us then. And this fabric here has some bird prints in it. If you were to look here, so here there's emu footprint, and also, oh, the nests. See, there's nests in there with 3 eggs. I put over here. And this represents our bird, our budgerigar, Kiora, that we had at the time. She was certainly a part of the family. And this little bit here is our cat Max. So when it does come time to choose fabric for your fabric collage quilt, and or even just to get started on a piece of fabric, think about what the story is. And if you have a story, that can help choose your fabric. And the fabric in turn can help tell a story.